listening to the most original talk radio station anywhere. We are LA Talk Radio at latalkradio.com.
You're listening to Question Reality. Question Reality with Priscilla Leona. Priscilla Leona. Only on LA Talk Radio.
Hi, welcome to Question Reality. I'm your host, Priscilla Leona, and we are coming to you live from Los Angeles, California. Our show is broadcast every Sunday from 5 p.m. to 5:50 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, if this is your first time tuning in, our show will help you to question your career reality. Now, this show is for you if you were, are, or might be considering a career in the entertainment industry. Our guests will provide tips, advice, and resource information on how and what it takes to successfully pursue a career in show business. Our guests work in various professions of entertainment, so that means that we will definitely have someone on the show from a career that you are interested. If you want to check out our past guests, read their bios, listen to their interview instantly, or download one of the shows, go to the LA Talk Radio website, latalkradio.com. Click the link at the top of the website that says Channel 1. Scroll down and look for our graphic, Question Reality. Click the link, and this takes you right to our archive page, and that's where you can view all of our past guests. Now, our shows are also available for download on iTunes under the podcast section. You just type in Question Reality Radio in the search box, takes you right there. And then we're also available on Stitcher, Stitcher.com, Sticher.com. And if you want to find out about our future guests, you're going to have to go to the official Question Reality website, and that website address is questionrealityshow.com, questionrealityshow.com. And I just want to thank everybody. We are, I've got a wait list. We are booked all the way until the end of May, and I've got some people holding because I could literally be booked for the rest of the year, but I'm just holding off because I'm telling you, you people are just running me ragged over here. It's just crazy, but I love it because our show has become so popular, and I really appreciate everybody tuning in. I love the emails. I love that we have listeners in Russia, Slovenia, Denmark, Germany, of course, England. You know how I am about the British boys. Love people in England, and all over the world, and I just love your emails. Thank you. Send more. Feel free to ask any question. I just had someone send an email last week and say, are we allowed to ask you personal questions? Yes, you can. And I also give sex advice, so feel free. Just kidding on that. Okay, so without further ado, I'll bring someone on that's more qualified than me. But before we go on, I wanted to tell you that we are going to be playing next week. Vassie, as you know, she was a guest on my show a couple of months ago. She is one of the hottest new singers out there. Her name is just Vassie. If you listen to or you watch Bravo, you hear her song, "You're My Desire." Now, I'm not a singer, but she's everywhere. She is the hottest thing ever. Her song was featured in the movie Cabin in the Woods. Also, her song is the theme song for the Victoria's Secrets campaign, Desire, and then also Nike, Google. She's everywhere. And next week, we are going to play the latest number one. So tune in next week to hear that. Now, without further ado, oh my God, I'm so excited about this guest. I am just elated. He is so cute. He is adorable. I want to just squeeze him. His name is Brian Kiley, and he is a comedy writer and a stand-up comedian. He does it all. There's nothing Brian doesn't do. And we are so lucky to have on the show. He was referred to me by a friend of mine, Jeff Rector, who used to have a show on LA Talk Radio as well a couple of years ago. And he is, let's just tell you a little bit about Brian. He is a staff writer for Conan O'Brien. He's been a staff writer for Conan O'Brien since 1994. He was nominated. What dream is it I would kill to be nominated for like a Patch Store Award. He's been nominated for 12 Emmy awards, 12 of those little bastards, and finally won 2007 award winner for writing in a comedy variety series. And Brian has appeared several times on The Late Show with David Letterman, The Tonight Show with Jane Leno, Late Night with Conan O'Brien, and so many more. He's also an actor. He's done voiceovers. He performs regularly at stand-up clubs in LA. The only thing I don't know is if Brian sings. So we're going to have to find out if he sings a tune. So without further ado, Brian, is that you?
It is indeed. Thank you, Priscilla. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my God, are you kidding? It is such an honor to have you on the show because, first of all, Conan O'Brien is hands down like my favorite late night talk show. You know, Albert and I, Albert's my husband, we used to battle it out because he was a Leno person and I was a Conan person. So we would have to draw straws. We would have to draw the hat. I said, I have to watch Conan O'Brien. That man is a comic genius. And there is only one other person that I put in the Conan O'Brien category, and that's Graham Norton. I don't know if you know who he is. British comic on the BBC channel, Graham Norton. Oh, he's the funniest thing ever. He's equivalent to Conan O'Brien, but in England.
Interesting. I'll have to check him out.
He is one of the funniest. I mean, Conan O'Brien is so funny in many, many ways. Graham Norton has a talk show, of course. He actually back in wait till you hear this, Brian. Back in 1999, 2000, when I was putting my toe in the water, pursuing a sitcom career, I was asked to be on the Graham Norton show. He actually was starting a late night talk show as well, but it never took off because I guess people just didn't get his humor. But he's hysterical. He is so funny. I have tears coming out of my eyes. So you got to check him out on the BBC channel. But
I will.
Yeah, please do that. But Conan is my love, and it must be a thrill a second to work for this man. Tell me, it must be a thrill.
Well, I have to say, I am amazed at how funny he is every single day. The best part of the job for me is right before the show when he and Andy are getting ready and they're fooling around and they're just hilarious every day. And I'm kind of like, to be that funny every single day. Like, I like to be funny and then take 4 or 5 months off. But these guys, it's every day. It's unbelievable.
How do they do it? I mean, it takes a lot of energy, right? How do they do it? Is this natural or is this a mental impairment that makes them a genius?
I do think there might be something wrong with him, but I mean that in a good way.
In a good way.
Well, he's a brilliant guy. He really is. So.
He really is. And I tell you, I was up in arms about this whole late night thing. I'm like, no, don't take Conan away, please. Because, you know, we watched him for all those years on the same channel, and you just know you're going to watch Conan at this time on this channel. So I was so upset about that. Now, I imagine you were you an original staff writer when he was on, was it Channel, oh Lord, I'm flipping out, Channel 2 or Channel 4? I can't remember. Channel 4. Were you a writer on the team as well back then? I assume you were.
Yes, I started. The show was on for about 6 months when I started, so I've been with him for 18 years now.
Wow. And I understand he's very loyal because he took everybody with him to the new channel, right?
A few people moved on, but he really took everybody else, and it. It was a trying time, as you can imagine. I moved out here. I moved out to LA. I moved my family, and then a few months later, we were all out of work, and that was a little bit. Disturbing.
That's when you came aboard. Where did you move from?
Well, we were the Conan show. We originally were in New York. We were in New York for 16 years.
I thought you meant you lived in another state, and then you moved to do his show, and then you went to New York, and then you. No.
When the whole show moved, we all moved out here. So.
Okay. Are you originally from New York?
No, I'm actually from Boston. I actually grew up in Newton, Mass. I grew up in the next town from Conan. He grew up in Brookline, and I grew up in Newton.
And you never knew him. them at that time? The whole time?
Well, you know what? We actually went to the same Sunday school when we were kids.
Oh, my God. And you knew them in Sunday school.
Well, it's funny. His brother was in my class, and my brother was in Conan's class. So we had this sort of
isn't that something?
just sort of a coincidence, really. But so I knew him just a little bit as a kid.
Isn't that weird? And you just never
It is.
know. You know, as a kid, you're in the Sunday school, you know them. How the heck did you know you'd end up working with them? That's amazing. Now, let's start back with a question that I ask of every guest, because this is what people seem to want to know. When Brian Kiley was a itsy-bitsy little teeny-weeny comedian, what did you want to do for a profession as a child? Because I know you must have been funny. Is that what you wanted to do when you were a child, say, I want to be a comedian, or did you have aspirations to be something else?
Well, it's funny you said that. You know, I did want to be a comedian, although even as a kid, I had no idea how anyone became a comedian.
Right.
You know, there's sort of there's no sort of path, and I didn't know how people do that. And I used to watch the Dick Van Dyke Show, which was my favorite show.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, well, if I can't be a comedian, at least maybe I could be. I knew that there were TV writers out there, and I thought, well, maybe I could write for a television show. So really, since I was probably, 11 or 12 or 13, I wanted to get into comedy.
Now, when you told your parents that you wanted to get into comedy, were they supportive, or they say, over my dead body, little Brian Kiley?
Well, do you know the term clinical depression?
Yes, I am.
No, I'm kidding. I think they I don't think that was their first choice. I think they were a little bit saddened to hear that. But I think that they knew that was sort of my passion, and I think they were kind of willing to let me kind of give it a shot, and if it didn't work out, then,
then
go
they got
into,
to say, I told you so. I told you.
Yeah, exactly.
I told you, Brian. Okay, so what steps, when obviously you're 12, 13, 14, or 15, 16, you're in high school, what steps did you take towards your desired career in comedy?
Well, it's funny. I actually, when I was probably about 16, I just started writing jokes. And I would write them down. I had these little note cards, and I had this little box, almost like a recipe box that my mother would have. You have this little recipe type box with the little 3x5 cards, and I would write jokes, and I would put them on these cards, and I would save them for, I don't know what I thought that I would need them for someday, but I just kind of got into the practice of writing jokes as a teenager.
So nobody told you that was a natural instinct for you to do. You just thought that's a great idea. I think personally that's a great idea. I'm actually gonna give that out as a tip to people who want to be a comedian. But I think that's a great idea. But nobody told you to do that. That was just a natural.
No, it was just something that seemed like it was fun, and it was like maybe some little mental impairment on my part, but it was a little obsession that I had.
Are you kidding? That's a great idea. Your mom has the recipes for food. You were writing recipes for jokes for your career.
Yeah.
That was just a great idea.
Well, I'm sure they were probably pretty terrible, but it's just you have to start somewhere.
Do you still have them?
No, I have no idea. I think I would really be appalled if I saw them.
No, you could actually autograph them and sell them. I would buy one. Okay, so when you were you took your little jokes, you were writing them on your cards. What did you do in your next advancement towards?
Well, when I was in college, I went to Boston College, and I was in school, and I guess I was about a sophomore or so. They had a comedy show at my school. They had some 3 professional comics from Boston came and did a show. And there was this one guy that I thought was hilarious, this guy named Barry Crimmins, and I went and spoke to him, and I said, I'd like to be a comedy writer. I've written a lot of jokes. And so he was running a club in Cambridge called the Ding Ho, and he invited me to his club, and I met him one afternoon, and I typed up 50 of my jokes, those jokes from the little note cards, and I brought him my jokes, and he looked them over and said, I like this one, or this one, maybe you should do it like this, or this one, do it for me, or whatever. But he kind of critiqued my stuff, and he said, in Boston, you really can't make any money as a comedy writer. You have to perform. And I was like, oh, I could never go on stage. Like, it was, the idea of it was terrifying. And he said, well, that's the really only way you can really make a living in Boston. So what happened was that next summer I took a summer school class at Emerson in comedy that was taught by Dennis Leary.
Wow.
And we did stand-up comedy, and we did comedy writing. And the last class, the students, we all invited guests in, and we performed. And it went well, and there was this woman comic there named Angela Eisenberg, who she said, oh, you should pursue this or whatever. So I went to an open mic the following week, and my friend Barry Kerman was coincidentally the host. So that went well, and then I just kind of kept at it ever since.
Well, when you went to perform, obviously you were really super nervous. What did you do to kind of handle your nerves?
Well, I would say there was something called alcohol. No, it's funny. I was so sort of naive. I mean, I was definitely nervous. I was terrified. Don't get me wrong, but. And it's funny because I started doing the shows. I would do Lenny Clark's show at the Ding Ho, and I was in college, so I could only go once every 2 weeks, or sometimes I have finals or midterms, and I'd be off for a couple of weeks. But I would be terrified, and sometimes what happened is the show would run long, and Lenny would say, "Oh, you know what? I can't put you on this week," and I would be so relieved. Other people were always bugging him of like, when can I get on next, or when can I get on? And I never bothered him because I was hoping that he would forget about me and I wouldn't have to go on. Because I was just so terrified,
That's so cute. Oh, you're sitting there. Oh, please, he does not want to be invisible right now. I'm going to hide under my recipe cards.
I know. And it's like, well, you did sign up, so you do want to go on, but I was so terrified. And what used to happen to me is I would do these shows on Wednesday night, and about Tuesday at noon, I would get a knot in my stomach every week. And then one time I was at school, and I got this knot in my stomach, and I thought, it's only Monday. I'm not supposed to get the knot until tomorrow. And then I realized, it's like, oh, it is Tuesday. Like, there was like a Monday holiday, and it was like, oh, wait, it is Tuesday. Like, my body knew when to get the knot in my stomach, even though mentally I didn't,
That is so sick that our bodies do that stuff to us, isn't it?
I know, it's insane.
It already knows. Your biological clock knew. If somebody wants to be a staff comedy writer on a sitcom or a late night show, or even as a comedic screenwriter, what degree or classes do you recommend that'll help to secure a job in that field, do you think?
Well, I guess it depends on, what city that you're in or that kind of thing, because I do think that a lot of different colleges, I think, offers, creative writing classes or even television writing or screenwriting or that kind of thing. And I think, I would just kind of, there are these different adult ed classes, and I would just look on the internet and see, where there are, sitcom writing courses or screenwriting courses or whatever it is, or stand-up comedy classes. I know, I know people take those. So I would find wherever city you're living in, I would go on the internet and see what's available and do that, because I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. We're overlapping.
We're
overlapping on each other, Brian. Like here in LA, they have the Ice House, and then the Comedy Store, and then the Improv, and there's so many places you can perform. But and Groundlings. I don't know if they offer classes at these particular clubs, but there's tons of classes and groups that you can join here in LA, and I would imagine New York as well.
I would think so. And I know Flappers offers classes in Burbank, and I would just check on the internet. I think there's definitely comedians around town who are teaching classes and things like that, or TV, former TV writers who are teaching classes.
Yeah, we're very fortunate if you're in a city like LA or New York or Miami, and I would think, of course, Chicago. I know they have the second city there. But what if you're in a small town in the Midwest, like a small town, say Pawnee, Indiana? Oh, that's from Parks and Recreation. I don't even know if there is a Pawnee, but say Pawnee, Indiana. What if there is no? What if there are no classes available at the local college or community center? What if there is none? What would you do if you're still, say, a teenager, you're living at home? What do you do to get your chops sharp?
I think if you want to be a sitcom writer, for example, you could check online. I'm sure there's several books out there about how to become a television writer. And I would see, whichever ones are rated the highest. And, there's screenwriting books. There's books about being a television writer. I would just devour those books. And what I've learned from reading those screenwriting books is if you read two different books, they're actually not contradicting each other. They're actually complementing each other. They're both saying the same thing in different ways. They're really actually reinforcing what the other is saying, is what has been my experience. So you're not getting contradictory information. You're getting two experts who are basically in agreement, and there's a certain approach that they're advocating, and I would follow that.
I have a question. I have heard around. First time I heard this was in one of my casting director workshops, and we had a casting director that cast for sitcoms, and she happened to mention something which really has eluded me, but I think I remember in comedy when you're writing, there are certain sounds or letters that are supposed to evoke some sort of feeling of happiness and make you laugh, and it's something like C's and K's. That's a formula.
Yes.
Do you know about this? What is that? Explain that to us.
Sure.
What is that?
Well, there are certain words that K sound, because it's so abrupt and it's hard hitting. If you describe someone, we had a joke the other day, and originally they said somebody was dumb as a post, and we changed it to dumb as a rock, and it's just what you're talking about, because when it ends on rock, it's so hard hitting. It just sounds harsh. Do you know what I mean? And there's something about comedy that it's like, if it ended in TH or something, it's too gentle a sound. Rock or brick or whatever it is, that if you can throw those words, just sort of enhance comedy for some. It's an old, like Neil Simon used to talk about stuff like that, about how street is funnier than road, and these little things like that. And that's a little. I mean, it only comes up every once in a while, but these are sort of some old comedy rules, I guess.
Brian, I am so sad because something happened with the sound, and when you started explaining, I heard nothing but, and I don't know if our listeners are hearing that as well. Am I clear? Do you understand what I'm saying, or do I sound muffled?
Yes, absolutely. Let me. Is it better on? I brought two phones. Is it better on this phone?
I don't know if it's on our end or your end, or if it's the whole process, but I would just die if our listeners couldn't hear what you said, because I did not understand a word you said.
Oh, I'm so sorry, because you sound perfectly.
Oh, wait. There you go. I hear you now. I hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the other day we had a joke, and it ended with somebody was as dumb as a post, and we changed it to dumb as a rock. Mm-hmm. And that K sound, it just sounds funnier. I don't know how to say it. It's just a harder sound. And words that, this is an old Neil Simon thing about how, words should end, like street is funnier than road. And you want to have that K sound because it sounds harsh and it sounds comedic. And if it has like a TH sound or something, it sounds too gentle, and you want that hard-hitting sound at the end of a.
So are there classes that actually teach that when you go to comedy writing classes? Do they actually teach those little tips and formulas that you can write to make things funnier implementing that process?
Well, I think that, there are so many sort of rules. There's sort of the rule of three. You set things up with two sort of straight examples, and then the third one is the joke. There are certain things like that you learn. I think one of the things that we work on all the time, if you can end the punchline with the funniest word, like with the key part of the joke. Sometimes you have to kind of manipulate things sort of grammatically so that it ends on the word bike or whatever. Oops, did I lose you?
Yeah, I can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's there's so many tips. It's hard to.
There's formulas out there. You just have to seek them out. So just know that there is a formula, because people. I was trying to explain that in my own little way to someone a couple weeks ago, and the person said I had no idea that there was a formula to use, and that you use C's and K's, and they were the funniest words that you should use. I said, oh, absolutely, that's what I heard, but I'm going to ask Brian Conley when it comes on the show.
Well, it's funny that's a very old sort of comedy thing, but just the fact that it actually came up last week is interesting. It's something that doesn't come up every day, but you do hear that from time to time.
Yeah, it's going around. It's like in a loop. It goes around and it hits you every so often. Now, other than helping to write a funny script for a show, what are some of a staff comedy writer's duties? Because obviously you have to write something, but what else do you do? Is it just writing, or do you have other duties?
Well, it depends on the show.
When you work on a late night comedy show, let's just say that.
Well, when you're working on a late night show, sometimes you are actually directing pieces. Sometimes it's because, we'll shoot something and our director really kind of shoots the show. So if there's something that's going to be live on our show, our director will direct it. But sometimes what will happen is you'll have a remote crew and you need to go shoot something at a bar, or you need to go, shoot something out in the field. As the writer of the piece, you're out there kind of directing the actors and telling them what it is you need from them for that specific piece and so on. So you sort of you sort of end up getting these sort of directing you end up
opportunities, right?
Absolutely, that you wouldn't normally have.
Now, see, I had no idea. I thought that those sketches, the little sketches that are considered remotes, where they show somebody doing something out somewhere other than live on the show. The writer who came up with the idea, or the collaborators on it, they actually get to direct it along with the director, or are they in charge of it themselves since they wrote it?
Well, usually when they're out in the field, they're usually in charge themselves, because what's happening is, sometimes there might be a couple of pieces at once being shot. So our director really is in the studio. So if you're out in the field, and it's only, our bits are so quick, so it's only like a 30-second piece usually, or a minute long, or like that. So,
but you get a chance to direct it. That's awesome. I did not know that before. I did not know that. And what does a typical day consist of as a staff comedy writer? You come in, you get your coffee, you line it with alcohol, of course, and then then what do you do?
Well, we come in, for us, what we do, I work mostly on the monologue, so except for on Fridays when we'll work on the other pieces. But what I'll do is you go on the internet. You basically have to dig up the premises, and what you do is you're looking for, okay, what topics what's in the news that Conan's going to talk about tonight. So you might be saying, okay, the president is in Brazil, and Kim Kardashian is dating this guy, or whatever it is. You're digging the premises out from the news, and then you we start writing jokes, and then what I do is there's a younger guy that I work with who I get together with him for about a half an hour and brainstorm because I just hate sitting in a room by myself all day. It drives me crazy. So then we all get together and we read through our jokes and we give them to Conan, and then we get them back from him, and he'll say, these are the ones I like. I think we should do more about. We don't really have the joke about the president being in Brazil yet, or whatever it is. And then we write another batch, and then we read through them with him, and he picks the jokes for the show, and then we might have one, then we'll go and have one more batch at the last minute, and that usually only has one or two that he might like. It's just too late at that point. And then we read through the cue cards of the ones that he liked earlier, and we confer with Andy and our head writer, and then we pick the order, and we pick the jokes and pick the order, and he goes out and does it.
Yeah, you're cutting in and out, but you know what? I'm really sad because I'm missing all of your great advice. But I'm just going to continue on, and I'm hoping that the people on the other end hear it. So I'm very, very sorry, but I'm like, damn, I'm missing opportunities for questions. Okay, so
should I?
No, it's fine. It's probably the whole computer Skype thing. That's probably what it is. So there's really nothing we can do. We're just going to carry on like it's a live late night show. All right, let's see. So basically, when I watch the credits, I see, say for example, that Conan and Jay Leno and Letterman, I see that they get credited with writing the jokes, but do they sometimes write their own jokes? Like when they do that, when they come on and they do their opening act, like Letterman and Leno, they come in, they do their jokes in the beginning of the show. Do they write them themselves, or are there people who write them, or does it just depend?
Oh, well, what happens is, with all the jokes that we give Conan, and we probably give him, 200 jokes a day when it's all said and done, he will pick the ones he likes, and he'll kind of rewrite them and put them in his own words. And he might say, I would say it like this, or I would cut out this part. He's very economical. I think that's actually a big sort of comedy rule is if you can take out the unnecessary words. I think the longer the punchline, the longer the setup. I mean, the punchline really it puts more on the line. So you want to have a quick setup and a quick punchline, and it's that sort of Shakespearean thing about brevity being the soul of wit. So he'll often edit things down, and then sometimes he'll have an idea of saying, "Hey, how about this punchline?" He'll come up with a joke instead of sometimes of, "Hey, how about this instead of what we had," or whatever. So he often he rewrites stuff every day, and he often gets jokes on as well.
That makes sense. Now, when you have a team of comedic writers for the show, which obviously happens with late night shows, sitcoms as well, how does the process work that leads to the final I'm going to say script, in this collaborative task of writing, does every writer get his or her material written within every show? Because I hear sometimes there's 12 writers on a show. That's usually maybe more for sitcom or something. But how does that process work where everybody feels like they're contributing, or does somebody get their stuff in this week and then maybe not next week? How does that work? How does everybody get a little piece of the pie in there?
Well, it's different with a late night show. It's a daily show, and it's a little different than a sitcom. I think sometimes a sitcom, a couple of writers might be assigned to work on this episode, and a couple other writers were assigned to work on the next episode. But even in a sitcom, that's more or less from my understanding, it's more or less from the first pass. So two writers might pitch an idea, and they say, okay, you two go, or one guy, and say, okay, you go write this. And when they come back with it, I think what they have is it's almost like a rough draft. Mm-hmm. And then in the room, as people read through it, and people say, okay, maybe instead of that joke, this, people throw out different ideas. They're constantly sort of reworking it and revamping it and strengthen it over the course of the week or the 2 weeks there.
Okay, and it works kind of the same way for a late night talk show?
Well, talk show is different because what happens is, Conan comes out and does, say, maybe 10 jokes up top. So of the 5 monologue writers, we're all throwing in stuff. And generally speaking, you kind of average getting on a couple jokes a day. Sometimes you might have a day where you get 4 or 5 jokes on, and then the next day you have a day you only get none on, or you get 1 on. You just kind of average it out. But
and when he's talking to the guest, those are things that he comes up with on his own. I mean, he can't be looking down at a cue card, right? I mean, when he makes these funny little comments with the interaction, that's all him.
Yes, that's all off the cuff stuff with him. Although what will happen is they have a pre-interview with a guest, and the guest might say to the producer, "Hey, I've got a funny story about when I went to summer camp," or something. So then Conan will, so Conan won't know the story, but he'll say, "Oh, so when you were a kid, did you go to summer camp or whatever?" And he'll kind of lead them into the story, and so Conan won't. So all that stuff is spontaneous and unplanned and so on.
And that's why he has a job, because he's funny. He can do that.
Yes.
Now, what do you personally, Brian, what do you love most and least about being a comedy staff writer? This is for people to say, okay, maybe I want it, maybe I don't want to be. So what do you love most and least about it?
Well, I have to say I really enjoy the, hanging out with funny people is a blast. I go in every day, and it's funny because I when I watch comedy, I really don't laugh very much because I'm just sort of analyzing it. It drives my wife crazy. We'll go see a comedy movie, and I won't laugh at all, and I'll come out and go, "I thought that was pretty good," and she'll be like, "Oh my God," It makes her insane, But you're just kind of analyzing when you're watching comedy. But at the show, you're in the office. Conan's hilarious every day. Andy's hilarious every day, and the other writers are so funny that just the fun sort of banter and all that stuff. I really enjoy that. And I think the only thing it's something I don't like. What's frustrating what's different about writing a late night show is it's almost like writing for a newspaper. Where you write your jokes and he does it, and then that's it. Whereas, I'm someone, I love sitcoms, and I'll watch an I Love Lucy or a Dick Van Dyke show or whatever, and you can watch this wrote, 50 years ago and still enjoy it. So there's nothing, our stuff, you do it and then that's it. Nobody's looking at it a week later or a year later or anything like that.
Right.
So that's...
yeah, it's kind of, you feel like it's lost in the wind. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. I always feel like I'm driving down the street 80 miles an hour writing stuff and just throwing it out the window. So,
but don't they have those shows now with the new media? Don't they have late night? And I've never checked this out, so I'm not sure. But don't they have all of the late night shows available, say on Netflix or Mubi or any of those type of online?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that there are clips that you can see on YouTube or things like that, but I don't know of
I know they'd have it for the Johnny Carson show, but because I have those.
You do? Wow.
I have the DVD set. Of course, Johnny Carson. Oh, my God. But I never looked it up to see if there's any Letterman, Leno, or Conan.
Yeah, I haven't. If there is, I haven't heard of it.
Maybe it's just Carson. It's just Johnny. Maybe you have to wait 20, 30 years before you can get your DVD.
Yeah, it could be.
So maybe your jokes will be heard again in in the year 2929. Now, do you think, now we were talking about comedy staff writers, you've also been a stand-up comedian. The same question applies. What do you love most? Oh, actually, with you having the knots, I probably shouldn't ask about the stand-up comedian part. Because you had the knots, so you might not love that. But what would you think that would be somebody who, a stand-up comedian, what do you think that there is to love and maybe not so much love?
Well, it's, there's nothing like, for me, the two things, there's nothing like having a great show. When you get a great audience, you have a great show, that's so and it's hard to replicate that. And also, when you have a new joke that you're excited about, that you can't wait to try, I love that. I think that what can be hard is being on the road and being away from your family, and all that stuff can be a drag.
Yeah. And of course, having hangovers because you're toasted the night before. Yeah. I know about those stand-up comedians. I hear those.
Well, it's also, you get certain audiences where you're like, oh my God, please don't make me go out there in front of them. There are.
The ones with the big tomatoes sitting on
oh my God.
Right? Well, I have a couple friends who are comedians, and this one guy said that when he first started out, that he had to go, and I don't remember the name of it, but it was in Florida, like Boca Raton, and he had to perform for these gray-haired
sure.
specials, is what he called. And he said that he was dreading that so bad, but it ended up being the best show of his life because they really appreciated his comedy. But he was really dreading it, but it turned out great. Now, do you think that being funny, I'm going to put quotes on that, do you think that being funny is something that can be learned, or do you think that it's just a natural talent? Or do you think that maybe you can have a natural talent and then maybe tweak it a little bit by going to some classes? What do you think?
Well, I definitely think that you have to have a little something. If you don't have, you have to have a good sense of humor or something to begin with. I do think that you can learn things. I think that you become funnier when you hang around funnier people, and I think also you can learn. I think a lot about stand-up comedy is kind of learning about what makes you funny and what's your funny side, and what, when I first started, I would do sort of some off-the-wall kind of Stephen Wright-esque type jokes, and people just didn't buy it from me. So I had to kind of learn what jokes worked for me and how people perceive me and all that kind of thing. So a lot of stand-up is just, it really takes, a good 10 years to kind of learn your voice and learn where you're coming from and what humor works for you and so on. So
what's interesting, and I want to get your opinion on it. I think this to be true because my whole life, my friends, let's just specify that. My friends and family have always said to me, Priscilla, you are so funny. You should be doing stand-up comedy. But can you explain that? The difference is you may be funny to your friends and your family members, but when you go up on stage to be a comedian, and that's something I've never done because I've never had a desire to do that, because I sort of realize that I may be funny to my friends and family members, but that's because they know me, they know my sense of humor, they get me. But when you go up on stage to be a stand-up comedian, nobody knows you, right? Or and it's totally different. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And there's so many people that they come out, and you see people. I used to host an open mic, and you'd see somebody go out, and they're totally unprepared, and they think, well, I'm funny. It's like, well, I'm sure you are, but you also need jokes, So it's definitely, you have to be able to be funny to strangers, and I guess that's the tricky part.
It is, because you can be funny to your family and friends by being sarcastic or making a comment or something like that. But it's different when you have to go up and be a comedian and tell a story and be funny, and nobody knows you because they don't really know where you're coming from. And I don't know what the secret is. I can't tell people what the secret is, but I've asked comedians and they don't seem to know what the secret is either. It's the hard thing, isn't it? It is. I do think there's something to be said for finding, almost like what is it about you and your essence. And there's certain comics who, I worked with this guy a few years ago, and his whole act was about his grandmother's gaseous problem and play his teeth, and it was horrendous. Yeah.
But off stage, he was talking about how he was raised Quaker, and they spoke this and thou and all these kinds of things. And it was like, that's what you should be talking about on stage. You've got this unique background, you're not tapping into it all. That's your story, and that's what's unique about you. So I think that's the finding your uniqueness.
Yeah, finding your strength as a comedian really has to come from you. Don't try to mimic or copy other people's jokes or their style. Like, I remember going to a comedy club, and there was a guy that was trying to be Richard Belzer. I mean, he was trying so hard, but it did not work for him. So if you want to be a comedian, you got to find what your comedic style is and be
absolutely. And find your your voice and what's unique about you and what makes you different from everybody else, that kind of thing. Years ago I was taking this acting class. I met this guy, and his name was Joe Smith, and he was the most ordinary guy I ever met. He was 5'9", he was average looking, his name was Joe Smith, and I was fascinated with him because I'm like, oh my God, this is the most ordinary person I've ever met. I was totally intrigued. So no matter who you are, I do think that there's unique things about you that you can find about yourself that makes yourself funny and unique.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you just have to get up there and do trial and error and find your strength as a comedian, and that's how you do it. I mean, just because your mother, father, sister, brother, and your friends tell you you're funny, you don't get yourself all pumped up and think that you're going to be great at it. Try it, but if it fails, then you could take other venues. You could become a sketch writer. There's so many jobs in comedy. You can
absolutely
do, right? Like
absolutely. And what people don't realize is you're going up there for 5 minutes. But I don't think they realize how much work goes into that 5 minutes. It's that preparation for those 5 minutes. Like, that's the key. That's the work that you put in before you go on stage is the key, I think.
Yeah, and some people think that they want to get into comedy, and they think that they have to just do stand-up. So if you go up there and you bomb and you keep bombing and bombing and bombing, don't be discouraged, because maybe your talent lies more in writing. Maybe you can write sketches. Maybe you could be a sitcom writer. Maybe you could be
Absolutely. There's guys that I work with who, they'd be terrified to go on stage, but they're hilarious. It's just they're just not comedians, but they're fantastic comedy writers. So absolutely.
So don't be discouraged, people. Look at Brian, 2007 Emmy Award winner. My God, Brian did it. And remember, he got the knots in his stomach when he went up for being a comedian.
I did for sure.
But yet, I understand that you're still chugging along. You're performing. Anything coming up that we can see you in? Any performances?
Oh, I'll be at the Comedy Magic Club this Friday and Saturday in Hermosa Beach.
Oh my God! I used to live in Hermosa Beach. I hope you got that posted somewhere so that I can see it. Is that on your Facebook page or anywhere?
You know what? I'm so bad about.
I was trying to find stuff about you, and you were like 007. You're like.
I'm like part Amish. I'm so bad at the technology, and Conan mocks me for it every day. It's terrible.
Well, let me write that down. So you're going to be in Hermosa Beach at, what is it called again?
The Comedy and Magic Club.
Comedy and Magic Club. All right. And what time?
I think the show's it's like 8 on Friday.
We'll look it up. You're worth it. We'll go to the website and look it up. And I know that you got an album out on iTunes that we can buy. It's called Self-Portrait. Is that available now? If we go to iTunes, we just type in Self-Portrait. Is that a comedy album?
Sure. Yeah, that's on Amazon or iTunes or whatever. Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so we go Amazon. So go to Amazon.com or iTunes, and you type in Brian Kiley, BrianKiley, and there you will have his comedy album, or type in Self-Portrait, and I am going to buy those and give them away for Christmas gifts, just to let you know. I think they would be excellent Christmas gifts to give away. And also to watch your jokes being performed by the one and only Conan O'Brien. And why don't you tell us when Conan O'Brien comes on and the channel?
He's on TBS a weeknight, Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. And
that's That's how people can hear your jokes being told through Conan. Right? We get a little bit of you through Conan every night, right?
I think that's fair to say, sure.
Well, Brian, I want to thank you so much. You have given our audience great advice. There are so many comics out there or aspiring comedians that you have helped, and I personally appreciate it, and I know they appreciate it. And I would love and be honored maybe next year, if you're not too busy, you could come back on our show and give us some more tips, advice, and because I still have 12 more questions.
Absolutely, Priscilla. I'd be happy to do your show. It's so much fun talking to you.
Well, it's fun talking to you, too, as a matter of fact, and I just hope that you have the best remaining career in comedy and whatever you want. I pray that you will have, because you're such a nice man and you're so kind to come on and share your wisdom, and I appreciate it.
Oh, sure.
Your wisdom. You're a boon of wisdom, Brian Kiley. Thank you so much, Brian. Say goodbye to your fans.
Okay, well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon, I hope. Okay.
We're going to see Brian this Friday and Saturday night at the Hermosa Beach Comedy Club. Also go to Amazon, iTunes for his comedy album, Self-Portrait, and watch his jokes through Conan O'Brien every night. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Bye, Brian. Bye, everybody.
Okay, Priscilla, thank you.
You're listening to Question Reality. Question Reality with Priscilla Leona. Only on LA Talk Radio.